What's up, everybody? So you got Sean and Matt here. We just wrapped up the Endlessly EP, 4 songs over the course of, what, Sean, like a full year and a half probably from start to finish?
Dude, maybe even further back. We're almost in summer 2022. We started writing Gone in the summer of 2020 as we were wrapping up the Now You Know album that we dropped during the pandemic.
These 4 really stood out, in progression, and Gone really felt right to be that first single to release.
It really did, man. And I remember we started writing that. We started producing it when we were still in Philly. I had since moved to Atlanta, but I was back there visiting you for a weekend. That's where we started writing that song. So I think it's serendipitous that we started writing Gone, the first song off the EP. Not sequentially, but the first song that we started getting into off the EP while we were there. Yeah.
And I mean, if we look at Gone specifically, the entire Endlessly EP is basically a journey that's an alternative rock lane that is a little bit different for us, but always something that we've admired and listened to growing up. So we really wanted to bring some of that feel into our own music, that late 90s, early 2000s sort of rock.
Yeah. Even maybe going overboard in that lane to try to prove a point to ourselves that we could make a song like Stacy's Mom. That was actually one of the pieces of feedback that we got on Submit Hub for Endlessly, is reminiscent of Fountains of Wayne.
From a polishing perspective, I think we've always come from a place where we wanted to make our music sound more professional. And I think this is, while it does sound very polished and the most professional sort of sound that we've come out with, now our goal moving forward is really to dial that back, become more experimental, using certain sounds, less layers, coming back to more raw form, because we've reached that peak, and really, finding our place within the genre that we really enjoy. I want to go back into Gone real quick.
Definitely.
So I was talking about how the entire EP is basically an alternative rock lane, but the lyrical content and where all of the emotions come with, both in the instruments and the lyrics, come from a breakup. The first true love of my life. In the different songs are different components of that grieving process that you go through.
Yeah, and not only the grieving, but the inception of it too. It's a good timeline that kind of captures where you were at each step of that journey in finding and losing that true love.
And maybe my pattern wasn't the stereotypical pattern of what the process is, but I know that Gone song particularly was bargaining, because I was saying, I'll wait for you, even though the chorus was going, gone. That's my mind. I was losing my mind. It wasn't I'm physically gone. It was I'm losing my mind because I don't know what to do, and how do I bargain to get back what I've lost?
Yeah. Now, do you think you felt like you were losing your mind because we were smack dab in the middle of the pandemic? That was probably 5-6 months in.
Pretty turbulent at that point, but when I actually got COVID for the first time, which turned into this long COVID, which I don't know if the listeners really know about, but it's extended symptoms after you get over COVID. So brain fog, dizziness, fatigue, it affected me neurologically, and still is to this day pretty significantly, actually, and it goes in waves. So I was dealing with that along with this breakup, and I think a lot of the concepts on the album, I think I mentioned memories specifically in 3 of the 4 songs as being a major theme, partly because memories are all I have to latch onto about the relationship, but also I feel like I'm losing them. Part of this neurological thing I'm going through is my long-term memory is shot, and it's scary as hell. To try to figure out and navigate my way through it and be okay, I'm going to get these memories back and I'm not going to lose them. It's a really scary thought. So every time I write about that, it's coming from both of those places.
Without those memories, baby, we don't have Hypothetical.
And so I think that's the point of these songs, is it's not you sit down and you start to like think about concepts and what to write about. I mean, at least for me, vocally and lyrically, like it just has to come. I'm not thinking about it before. It's just always like what needs to spill out on the page, and then it happens. And I guess moving into the next two songs that we really wrote after Gone, it was Endlessly and Goodbye. And you had sent over instrumentals both at the same time, like for both of those tracks, and immediately it just clicked. I mean, what was going on with you during that point?
I need new sounds, new plugins, new ways of doing things that actually spark new lanes that I'll like try to dive into musically. And in this case, I think I had just downloaded like a Paul Reed Smith amp plugin, and it, as soon as I dialed it in, I heard those tones that, you know, you hear on the EP, the more early 2000s alternative rock and pop rock tones. As soon as I put down that first guitar lick, I was like, yeah, this is cool, but I need a lead lick over top of like the picking lick. And as soon as those two things came together and I recorded both of them and sat back for a second, I was like, you know what? You have something here. Like, this is at least good enough to share with Matt and see where he would want to take it vocally. So yeah, it was just a snapshot in time where I was trying to sort through working with this new plugin that made the guitar sound really good.
Songs rarely manifest that way for us. I mean, usually in our process, we're together when the song starts, and then we get as far as humanly possible in like a weekend, and then we split ways and we finish it up, and it goes like, okay, does this pass the sniff test? Is this going to make it like into an actual song, or is it just going to be a half song forever? With these two, I had the luxury of sitting down and like really thinking through the vocals and lyrical content and everything, and like the melodies and how it would go, without there being this like, not that there's pressure in the room like when we're together, but it's like, oh, it needs to happen pretty quickly because we need to keep the momentum going. Where I was like able to sit with it for a week, and I honestly, looking back at the EP, think Goodbye is probably the best lyrical and melodic writing on the album. And it just, that first verse, it really just tells a story.
And I remember we wrapped both Endlessly and Goodbye in the Poconos, which is just like this mountain getaway, where we set up a makeshift studio. We got to get back there because there's always magic that happens there. But other than that, it's either my home studio in Atlanta or Matt's new setup in Florida. So, and I want to go back to actually the pressure topic for a second with the music component in the mix, and always trying to stay productive since we only have so many weekends out of the year that we are hanging out and doing things. There can be pressure that seeps into the room anytime we hit record, or like we're working through a 4 or 8 bar drum loop and trying to figure out what the melody needs. So yeah, that was a really interesting exercise, and something that we should probably do more often is to send more ideas back and forth in advance of when we're actually getting together, because it could alleviate some of those pressures that we kind of put on ourselves moving forward. But you know, out of the pressure also comes diamonds too. So
I just put so much weight on what we're doing musically, like this creative outlet that we have, that we share. I mean, nothing makes me prouder when we put out songs that we really enjoy. And, you know, the feedback is nice, but obviously we're not like this well-acclaimed band. So really it is at the end of the day for ourselves. But like nothing I do in other areas of my life gives me as much joy. And that's where the pressure comes in, because I'm like, okay, if I don't produce something that really expresses how I feel, either on the guitar or in the instrumental or vocally, then I feel like I'm falling short. And it's a very important area. And when I'm alone in my own studio and working, I'm not drawn to it as much. Like there's just something about being with you that allows my creativity to come out.
Speaking for myself, when you're in the room with me and we're producing or recording something, I'm going to either get pushed by you to be more experimental with it, or in my own head, I'm going to be like, all right, what would I typically do versus what's going to gonna make Matt react a certain way. So it's really the collaborative nature that we've fostered over the years that has allowed us to kind of grow and expand our sound. And yeah, we're just going to keep doing that and hopefully one-upping ourselves. You never know what's going to come next, but that's kind of that's the beauty of it. That's what keeps us coming back.
Well, a lot of it also comes from our music influences too. And I mean, they continuously shift. But if you look at like what we were listening to in college versus what we're listening to now, like I got you on the jam band train, and then we got into like really weird sort of bands like King Gizzard, and we're like, how can we make songs that are this experimental and weird, but then come together and they are catchy too? I mean, like that's what we really strive for. And, you know, that's what you're trying to do in the studio, is create something that's totally unique.
Absolutely. Let's talk about specific bands that we tried to tap into, or just influences that we've had that have never really wavered as we started Hypothetical.
Historically speaking, the bands that we've referenced, number one is the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mean, I know that band is used a lot. They're super popular. It's like, you know, it's a stock band for guys to say, what's your favorite band? The Chili Peppers. But the fact is like, we grew up on those guys. And if we could strive to make something as funky and as original, Kiedis just has this ability to sing and rap, you know, over these like very intricate instrumentals, you know, and that's four guys. And, you know, we're not that technical, but if we can do that on some scale, I think that would be really the ultimate vision in a lot of ways for what we strive to do. Yeah,
I remember we talked about how when they're tracking a song, they're probably in a live room. They just have 4 to 5 channels of whatever their instrument is for that particular song, and then that's the song. Whereas in order for you and I as a duo to achieve that kind of sound, we probably have at least double the amount of channels that we're recording on to get something that's gonna come through and really resonate. The nucleus, the creative nucleus of Hypothetical will always be you and me, but at what point do we really try to reach out and try to fill out our lineup a little bit? So only time will tell.
If we're able to bring on a talented drummer and people to fill out some of these roles in some of the areas that we're not really proficient in, but then also really don't have a drive to become proficient in, or really the time. I mean, at a certain point, how many hats are we going to wear? We're making our own stuff, we're pre-mixing, then we're also doing our own videos from conception all the way through. And mostly it's from budget constrictions, and also like we're coming up with ideas on the fly. But I feel like the content game too has just become a whole nother level for us that like we somewhat enjoy, but we really wish we could just focus on the music.
Yeah, it's a two-headed beast, if you ask me. Going from the actual creation, songwriting, recording, production of a song versus packaging it up, I would say I definitely am way more excited about the former rather than the latter. But we're finding our way in this DIY space. Disclaimer, the music industry for indie artists is not a lucrative business. So hence why we do have to do a lot of these things ourselves and equip ourselves with the tools to be able to do so. And I think we've done a pretty good job at that.
Let's just wrap up Endlessly real quick, because we hadn't really touched on that. And that's an interesting one, because I usually go based off of pain. Like I talk about the negative experiences in relationships, and it's not because I want to, it's what comes out. I mean, and that's the type of music I listen to. It's the type of music I feel like resonates the best with me. And so that's what comes out. But with Endlessly, even though it has these undertones of some negativity, it's really probably the truest love song we've ever written. And it was really interesting because it was coming at the same exact time as Goodbye. And both of those songs, if we're talking about that chain, going back to that grieving train, I would say that was the denial stage. Endlessly was like the love song of like, this isn't real. Like, we're going to end up together. You know, there's no way this isn't going to happen. And here's a reminder as to all of the great things. And there's some references in there about like a garden and, you know, watering it and letting the memories grow and things like that in the second verse. And I mean, it's a pure love song. And then Goodbye is one that's like, questioning, you know, is this goodbye? Is this done? And at the end, it's like, this is goodbye, and like coming to some sort of a realization, but still in denial of all of it, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting that those two kind of trains were on the tracks at the same time.
You can imagine how messed up my mind was going through. And that was, we wrote those, just for clarification, this past fall.
Yeah. Going back to Endlessly specifically, I think my favorite section, and we could say for each of the songs, our favorite section would probably be the outro, because we always have some sort of interesting kind of jammy outro going on that really elevates the song. But I think my favorite part of Endlessly actually is after the first full chorus, and it switches to "Even on our worst days, this garden's filled with memories," and that slowly ramps up as like a second verse into a second hook. But structurally, it's a little bit off the beaten path, which I love. And it just, that section, for whatever reason, it always gives me goosebumps.
Speaking on that part in particular, I remember specifically going after the National on that, and really trying to capture that whole feeling that was going on, which is one of our huge influences.
Yeah. You just have to, if you wanted to be Matt Berninger from the National, you'd have to drop your octave down one step.
Sean does a lot of the lowest octaves because I just simply can't reach them.
Oh yeah, I can reach it every now and then.
So those two songs kind of happen simultaneously, and our whole plan all along was to release these songs as singles. Because we saw on Now You Know, some of the songs that we put on there just kind of got overlooked. Man,
talk about overlooked just as a project in general. And maybe we weren't at that stage yet where we really knew how to push it and market it and capitalize on what we did. But such a shame.
Well, when we start playing that album live, I think people are really going to understand what's behind it, because we mixed and mastered that ourselves. So, you know, I think we didn't really do it justice there, but some of those songs, like listening back on them, like they had bones. And I remember when we were about to release it, we were sitting in Florida out by that pool at like 2 a.m. and listening to the whole album. This is by far the best stuff we've ever released. And I know we feel that way pretty much every time we put something out, which is a great feeling. But I think we've been humbled now enough to the point where like our expectations aren't big really by any means.
I remember too, driving home from Florida. I drove to you that time to wrap up Now You Know. Driving back, like 8-9 hour drive. And I just had all the songs from the album on repeat. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is easily the best thing we've ever done. And now 2 years later, you know, we're having the same experience with Endlessly, and we'll continue to have that experience, I assume, with the stuff that we release in the future. So it's always really exciting yet humbling at the same time.
Do you feel like after we do a big release, there's always this like lull. There's always a point in which like we kind of need a refresher. We need to figure out what the direction is. We go through iterations of different types of songs. Do you feel like, I mean, we started to pick up momentum, a lot of momentum in this past fall, but we did take, in my opinion, maybe a little bit too much time between the end of Now You Know and the next project, you know, with just that Way Back Now single in between and the tier cover.
I think Now You Know depleted us and our energy and our creativity a little bit. We really worked hard on it, and so we needed a little bit of time to reset. And I thought we did a great job with the tier cover, the Red Hot Chili Peppers tune that came out last year, I think last March.
That was fun.
And yeah, that was a great exercise. Yeah, we just didn't really know what was next. Like, and being a little bit discouraged on how that album was received too. That probably was a factor as well. And we just had to get back on the horse and continue to do what we do. And I think it all kind of got back on the horse for me when we went to Peach Fest last summer, and the inception of the Way Back Now tune was born. And from there, although Endlessly and Way Back Now, the EP and that single don't really align, it was a great snapshot in time. And I feel like every song that we have is its own relative snapshot. And that got us back on track. And then the creative juices started flowing again. And now we're in this space where, yes, we packaged up these 4 songs as an EP, but we're actively working on stuff behind the scenes as we release this. So I think it's interesting in terms of strategy, like putting all your energy and time into an album versus continuously feeding people with singles. Following the singles train allows you to keep up that momentum. And so I think that's probably what we're going to do for a little bit. Only time will tell, but that will help us kind of maintain that momentum moving forward.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how we ended up transitioning into an EP, because initially it really was just those 3 songs, and we knew for sure we wanted to release them. And then we had this other song that was, we wanted something that was more ballad-esque, that was almost like an acoustic. It could be brought back down to the raw form. And we started working on it on one of my trips to Atlanta, and it turned into Riley. But it was sitting there for a while, and it's kind of like my personal letter. I wanted it on the project so badly because it was like my most vulnerable state. There was a lot of emotions that went through dealing with the release of all of these songs. It's not easy to have to relive them through vocal takes and relive them through videos and promotion. I mean, it's still to this day very much, with me. But Riley was like that icing on the cake of like, okay, if we can make this song right, then it's well deserved, and it's turned out to be one of my favorites on the project.
Yeah, it's interesting. You speak about the process of almost like punishing yourself and having to relive aspects of the relationship or whatever the subject matter is for a tune, but how rewarding and cathartic it is once it's packaged up and it's complete and it's out there for other people to experience. And Riley's a really interesting one to me because we had started writing that one and producing that one when you were here before Goodbye and Endlessly even came to be. As creative ideas. And I think we were stumped on Riley in terms of the soundscape that we wanted, the instrumentation that we wanted. And in its current state at that time, before we really found our way, it was looking like we were just going to kind of leave it where it was. And yeah, it was an exercise, but it felt like this half-baked thing that we didn't really know how to treat or what to do with it.
Yeah, and we had gotten to the point where the entire structure of the song was there. And then I had even laid in the solo at the end, but we couldn't find the right sound for it. And then I wasn't sure about it. And time is your enemy sometimes, because like you have momentum towards something and then it just sits. But it was always in the back of my mind. I'm like, I really want to put this on there. And then we spent, a good amount of time on a weekend. We were together finalizing it, and we were like, okay, this is a real song now. It sounds mature instead of like we were trying for something that wasn't working. It really came into its own. And I think that we packaged it up and immediately sent it to Walt, our mixing engineer, as the 4th track. And we were like, okay, we're going to release this as an EP. But all of that just happened just a few months ago.
Yeah, big shout out to Walt, our mix engineer. And for those that don't really understand like what a mix engineer does, he's pretty much the guy that is taking all of our separate tracks. So every guitar track that we have, every bass track, every drum track, meaning your kick, your snare, your hi-hat, all the individual elements of a song, and then obviously the vocals, which can be expansive in a recording session too. I'm talking... Matt's definitely doing a lead take for each of the verses and the choruses, but then there's doubling at times, there's ad-libs, there's echoes, and just other nuances. Basically, Walt's taking all of that in its raw state and making all of the frequencies of those different elements really tie together and play nicely. And that's a luxury that we didn't have. So we're super excited to be able to work with someone at his level of proficiency and talent to be able to take our songs to the next level after we feel we've done everything that we can with them. And Riley is a really good example of where he not only did that proficiently in terms of making the frequencies tie together with all the different elements, but also we kind of pushed him to get a little bit more creative. And we ended up being on a mixing session with him for 2 to 3 hours one night.
Yeah, I mean, he really stuck it out with us, you know, and that's what I respected about him is he just wanted the best version of the song for us and for him.
And if you think about like the end goal that we told him we wanted for Riley, it was this live setting. I even sent him the national cover art for Boxer as a reference. I was like, this is how we wanted to sound, kind of like a 1950s, 1960s ballroom type of vibe where it's stripped back. You can hear each element clearly and perfectly, and it just sounds like a tight band. And if you listen to that song, that's what we have. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, like, sometimes these take 10 iterations of back and forth and mixing and, you know, live mixing, and then you sit and listen to it in a bunch of different channels. Like, the car is always the best test for us. We love the car test.
And I think we're at a spot in our indie career where we're just trying to reach a broader audience. And one way to do that is to make things that sound a little bit more accessible for everyone. And what we really want to do with that is generate the demand for an album. So that's what we're working towards right now in my mind is trying to get people excited about what another full length from Hypothetical could look like. And
so we always weigh this, like we have conversations about this all the time, but like, it's been a long time since we've played live and you're flexing a whole nother muscle. But at the same time, there is no better feeling in the entire world as playing your music on a stage. Like, I don't even know how to begin to describe how I feel when I'm like standing next to you, singing, playing, we got the whole band. That has to happen again in the near future.
And it's perfect timing because we are about to release a full North American leg of tour, opening for the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the National. So you guys are in for a treat.
Aren't we headlining and they're opening for us? I thought that's how it was going. No, I guess the point is that one of the difficulties obviously has been that Sean and I live in two different cities. Now, we have played shows like that before, but it just being the two of us writing everything, it's difficult to get musicians up to speed with our music to be like, hey, we're only going to play a handful of shows at most, and we're not going to be paying you all that much money, and then it's just a quick gig. So it's difficult to find talented musicians that really believe in it, but that's a big goal for us in our career as musicians is like doing that.
Yes, 100%. And I think as you said earlier, transitioning or shifting your songs from their recorded state to a live state and finding the right pieces to fill in and actually do it justice it's such a time suck and it takes so much energy. And to do it for a one-off show, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for us anymore, just from an investment standpoint in terms of not only time, but money as well. So it would be really nice to just just land a supporting role on a tour where we could justify the fact of putting that time and investment back into creating a live performance for us that we feel is doing our songs justice. And hopefully that comes at some point in the near future.
Well, Sean, as soon as you move to Florida, I mean, that's going to be the game changer. I know that we've talked about this, you never know at what point it might happen. I may have to move to Atlanta in order for it to happen. I don't know. But at some point, we're going to figure this out because, my friend, it's awesome being in the studio with you, but prepping for live shows and blasting our ears and like with our own music, there's really nothing quite like that.
Yeah, sharing the stage together is definitely, there's no better feeling. So, yeah, we are going to have to figure it out. If we are to live in the same city, then we can actually give Hypothetical a true shot versus where we're at now, which I think we're still doing a great job, but there's certain things that we're just not able to do from different cities.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on, the release of the songs and how they're performing and what's been surprising to us versus what hasn't.
Yeah, I feel like this has been the best kind of organic response to a project that we've put out. Instead of us kind of dwelling on, what could potentially be a negative. Oh, we haven't reached, the thousands of listeners that we want to. Like, I think we can take a lot of positives away from this release versus kind of walling away and saying to ourselves, oh, we'll never be as big as we want to be. I think it's all just part of the journey. And with this release, I feel fueled to continue and put more time and energy into our project.
And also, what's been interesting about this in particular is that the songs are kind of split all evenly between who what people's favorites are and like what they gravitate towards, which I really like to see. I mean, I've heard from individual people that each of the songs is their favorite. And that really means a lot to me because it means that, we're speaking to different people on different levels. And also, we've been discovering for the first time new artists that we really like after listening through our album. Like, Spotify generates other similar artists, and our similar artists were terrible before. They were just like a completely different lane. And now it's like we're actually discovering really cool bands. So that actually means a lot to me too. It's like, okay, we're getting recognized in this category.
I think, we did ourselves justice in trying to go after something specific, which is then easier for a robot or a machine to actually identify on the back end. So it's working well, and we're discovering some really dope artists along the way.
And I think there's a level of both where we can have a harmonious sound to our next project and a complete sound, but also to be experimental in different ways. And we're seeing a lot more of that in different types of music now. But it is exciting as we move forward from here.
Yeah, and it's always really fun at the end of the day once it's all said and done and the project is out, and just going for a drive on a nice sunny day, cranking up the tunes in your car and listening from a listener's perspective. So Matt and I have our ideas of, how these 4 songs make us feel, but we're really curious about, again, like what your favorite song is out of the EP and why. We asked everybody, what do you want to hear about the EP? And now we're going to single out who asked what question. We're going to address that question. And without further ado, Liv Breton, most challenging song to make.
What's your answer?
Riley.
Riley was most
not only
challenging?
from an emotional standpoint for you, but actually from a production standpoint too. Again, trying to actualize what a 4-piece like intimate band would sound like. And I think we were successful in that, but it took a while.
No, that's a great point. I'm going to say Gone, only because that was the transitioning song into this sound.
Yeah, it took us a lot of time to find what that next thing or next lane was going to be for us, and we just so happened to find it. One word to describe the EP: euphoric.
I'm going to say, for me, memories, because that's what I associate this with. It's just every song has that content, and it brings that feeling of like, even reminiscent of what we used to listen to as kids. Those are memories. Everything is revolving around memories.
Totally. All right, last question from Daniel Bernardi 3. How do you come up with the Christian Backstreet Boys Oasis vibes?
Dude, just pure talent.
I mean, that's something we've been shooting for our entire lives.
Yeah. Is that something that we got? Did we get that feedback from somewhere?
Yeah. Across our socials, we put out a shout out to everyone hating on the EP earlier this week. And there was some guy on TikTok that said goodbye sounded like it was made for a Christian Hallmark movie. And then we had various pieces of Submit Hub feedback saying like it sounds like Backstreet Boys mixed with Oasis, nothing new here. And other people saying like, I wish I had never heard this. So that's always fun. Yeah,
so we're obviously trying to promote these songs through multiple channels, and a lot of it's feedback related. And we'll get one that's like, love the vocals, hate the instrumental. And the next one's like, vocals trash, the instrumental's great. And we're like, it's like not positive at all.
Just the full gamut across the board. You get so many different opinions. And that's the beauty of music at the end of the day. That's what makes it so interesting, but also so hard to like continue to do, is you have to develop that armor that allows you to keep pushing forward even when you get people shitting on you.
I mean, as a final thought, I do really appreciate the people that have come check out our music and have been fans. You know, we have our day ones. We have people that got on a little bit later, but regardless, we're happy that you're here. We want to know what you guys want to hear, what you like, what you don't. And hopefully we can start a better communication channel through this.
Thank you so much for listening. And let us know if you want to hear conversations like this in the future, because this has been an interesting exercise for us and another way for us to just bring more energy and more momentum around our releases.